All right, we will get started with our webinar. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the ACMA's webinar series of How to Build a Career in Pharma. My name is Caitlin Calvo. I'm the Associate Director of Customer Success. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. For those of you who have joined us previously, welcome back. Now, we are the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, the ACMA, and our mission is to truly establish a higher level of global independent standards of excellence, really across the board throughout the pharmaceutical environment and obviously within medical affairs. So that being said, today we are going to be talking about how to excel and propel your career in pharma. To begin, the ACMA Life Sciences Associate, Dr. Kiana Dixon, will review the key skills required to succeed in the pharma industry, and also to help answer some questions. A particular one, does board certification matter? This month, we will also have a special guest on our webinar and a board certified medical affairs specialist, Matthew Scott, who currently works in medical affairs and will also give insight on his experience in the industry. So without any further ado, I will give the floor to Kiana.
Thanks, Caitlin. So as Caitlin mentioned, I'm Kiana Dixon, and as a pharmacist with the ACMA, my role as a life sciences associate is really to provide information to not only ACMA, but also to interested professionals like yourself, everyone here on this webinar today about the life sciences industry. So again, thank you all for joining us today in the continuation of this webinar series, where we'll just be discussing the multiple career options and the many opportunities the pharmaceutical industry provides. I also wanted to mention really briefly before we start how we will approach questions this afternoon. So please ask your questions in the Q&A feature of Zoom that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And Caitlin will actually be reviewing and noting your questions, and we can address those at the end. My goal today is for us to really highlight the skills to succeed in the different roles in pharma, specifically in medical affairs. Like Caitlin mentioned, we'll also review the BCMAS program, and we'll also have a guest speaker this session. So Matthew Scott, he'll answer a few questions about his experience in medical affairs, as well as his experience by becoming certified. And then of course, by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to answer the question, does board certification in medical affairs matter? All right, so what to expect on the webinar today, since we are doing things a little different than normal. Here's a quick agenda. So again, we'll go over medical affairs, then we'll dive into those skills to succeed in pharma. Then we'll go over the BCMAS program, the official board certification for medical affairs. And then we'll move forward with our interview with Matthew Scott, and then we'll address those questions and answer questions at the end of the webinar. Alrighty, so this screen may look a little familiar. We've discussed before the details of each of these teams and each of these departments, but let's look at where specifically the medical affairs team sits as a team, since we'll be discussing medical affairs as a whole today. Internally with these other teams here, research and development and commercial, the medical affairs team is traditionally looked at as the bridge between both. But today we're now looked at as a pillar because the medical affairs function itself brings many insights and a lot of value for the strategy of the entire organization. Now let's take a zoomed in focus and we'll look more into medical affairs. So how can we define medical affairs? So let's think of how we saw medical affairs before, sitting in the middle between those different teams. Now, we imagined before that it was more of a bridge, and this is because the functions of medical affairs are data generation and data dissemination. And because of those two main functions, we're now a pillar. The data that we get that's generated from the research and development team in those clinical trials, they're then disseminated to the medical community, including healthcare providers and other healthcare professionals, but also to patients. And remember who we mentioned tailors the brand messaging of a pharma company's product in past webinars is commercial. And that's why we see medical affairs as being that bridge, and because they work with both organizations. And the medical affairs role is evolving. We're seeing that the exchanges we have with physicians and other healthcare providers are focusing on a higher scientific level, especially when it comes to educating on disease states and treatment options. And also with the rise of technology, We're also seeing a rise of digital capabilities and digital tools that are giving the pharma company those insights into what the healthcare system needs. And this strategy is, again, largely handled by medical affairs. All right, so now let's shift into those skills that are important for all medical affairs teams. Right, so these are beyond the clinical understanding that's required for disease state understanding and clinical knowledge. So on top of all of those skills, you must also be proficient, again, in disease state and therapy and these skills here on the screen, especially for your particular organization. Business acumen, also known as business savviness, business sense, and business understanding. This is your keenness and quickness and understanding and how to deal with the business situation. Within medical affairs, remember we mentioned that medical affairs is that key driver for the strategy of the pharma organization. So if you understand the business strategy of the entire organization, you can provide more value. Communication skills are skills required across the board, no matter which function within medical affairs you're working with. You're communicating either cross-functionally with other medical affairs team members, or you're communicating to external stakeholders like physicians, pharmacists, nurses, other healthcare professionals. Medical writing within some functions in medical affairs, this particular skill is used more often than others, but medical writing at a minimum is still used across the board. Project management is the same. While some functions within medical affairs, they may only focus on 1 or 2 projects at a time, the entire medical affairs teams in itself will handle a lot of projects at one time. As cross-functional collaboration, like we mentioned with medical affairs teams, medical affairs not only work cross-functionally within their own team of medical affairs, whether that's with medical information, med communications, pharmacovigilance, but also those other 2 pillars, research and development team, and also working with the commercial team and sales. And then finally, relationship building. This is the key area and function of medical affairs, is to build those relationships with other healthcare providers and pharma organizations. So of course, this is a major skill for medical affairs. All right, so we'll get back to those skills, but now we're doing another shift, and we're going to move to the highlight here, right? Our BCMAS program. So this program is the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist Program. And because of the increased need for standardization across medical affairs and the medical affairs field, the ACMA developed the first board certification for medical affairs professionals. And that's how we're approached here with the BCMAS. So this program, we take a look at each of these sections here. We'll take it first at the format. The BCMAS program is an accredited, self-paced online learning program, and it was designed to show your expertise of the industry to healthcare providers and also KOLs, key opinion leaders, and to also provide you with the knowledge and skills so that you can become best in class in medical affairs. Again, reviewing the format, we mentioned that it's completely online, and because it is all online, it's completely self-paced. There are no lectures that you have to attend. You can access this learning program whenever you like. So if you're a night owl and you love to work in the evening, you have that possibility of completing the program and that flexibility to work on it while you're still awake. If you're an early morning riser, you also have that option. Whenever you're available to do extra professional development, you have that opportunity to complete the BCMAS program. And now in 2022, you can actually access this program wherever you like also. So you see the phone here on the screen to the right. The program can actually be accessed from your phone or your tablet if desktop is ever unavailable. Or if you need that flexibility to where you're working somewhere else and you have some free time on lunch, you'd like to complete a few modules, you have that option through our app. All right, so looking at our target audience for the BCMAS program. So these are just some of those common functional areas that we see enroll into the BCMAS program that are already in medical affairs. So whether your goal is to become a medical director, an MSL, work in HEOR, med info, again, it crosses the entire industry in medical affairs. So if you're interested in one of those roles, the BCMAS program will suit you. The course was designed so that whoever is learning this content, they're able to successfully work, again, cross-functionally with other team members. Now let's take a look at the curriculum. Right, so I mentioned that it's all online. How do we provide all this content to you online? The content is provided to you in e-modules, and you actually have 20 modules within the BCMAS programs, and each module comes with knowledge checks, it comes with a pre and a post quiz, and also interactions in between. Enrollment also includes a toolkit, and this toolkit includes case studies to where you can actually apply the content that you learned in the course to real life examples. And then at the end, there is a final assessment. And with the BCMAS program, we actually have the opportunity to provide an audio supplement. We like to provide multiple accessibility options and opportunities for those who may need it. We know that Kindle and Audible are those huge names right now, but we actually offer the BCMAS audio to where if you want to drive and you want to listen and learn as you're driving to work, you have that opportunity. The audio version is only available as a supplement. If you need more information on the audio, feel free to go through our website. I'll post the website at the end, or you can just reach out to one of us here at ACMA. All right, so we've gone over the quick logistics of BCMAS, what to expect, but what's actually included in the BCMAS program. What will you get out of becoming board certified in medical affairs? So the BCMAS program was developed by over 35 experts and specialists within the industry. And while they were developing this particular board certification, they wanted to mimic those key skills that we saw previously and include those in the BCMAS program. So they wanted to focus on these key areas here, and we can go through each. So the first being technical competencies, right? So this is really understanding, This is really understanding how to design, interpret, and analyze clinical trials, and how to interpret evidence-based medicine, which we know is driving pharma and medicine as a whole. Life sciences understanding, this is understanding all areas of the life sciences. So yes, we want to increase your understanding of the traditional pharma organizations, but also diagnostics and medical devices to where you can become a broadly trained medical affairs professional. BCMAS also reviews those key compliance and regulations that govern the industry and interactions between key opinion leaders and MSLs, like the pharma code, for example. The pharma industry and medical affairs itself is a highly regulated function. Because of that, you get those compliance regulations and regulatory issues here in the BCMAS program. And of course, to be a successful medical affairs professional, we have to build up those soft skills, those business acumen skills, so where you can drive those interactions. BCMAS covers those important areas like KOL mapping and how to effectively present to different stakeholders. So the BCMAS program is all about excellence in medical affairs. We want to provide standards and uniformity across the board. Here with the BCMAS program, you can illustrate that excellence with BCMAS credentials. So after you complete the program and after successful completion of the final assessment, the BCMAS program is actually available for you to use as credentials after your name. So here we have an example of Amanda, who is a pharmacist who completed the BCMAS program, and now she has those BCMAS letters after her name. You may have seen this commonly on LinkedIn, but we also see those individuals use them on business cards or on their resumes and CVs. So if you're looking to show the outside looking in that you're an expert in medical affairs, this is one of those benefits for professional development that BCMAS provides you. Now that we reviewed that first board certification, BCMAS, let's review again how becoming board certified can supplement those skills that we first mentioned at the start of the webinar. So how can we excel and propel your skills with the board certification medical affairs specialist program? So if we look at each skill, let's first start with the business acumen. These are the modules that are directly related to increasing your business acumen skills. So here, there's just overviews of those specific areas in the pharma industry that we mentioned. So the entire pharmaceutical industry overview with medical device and diagnostics, because the more you understand that industry, the more value that you can bring to that organization. When it comes to medical writing, we have specific modules on abstract and medical writing, as well as publication practices. For cross-functional collaboration, we have modules specifically for each function within medical affairs. And within the BCMAS program, throughout all 20 modules, we hit and give examples on how you can work cross-functionally and to successfully complete a project for a drug launch or for any medical affairs responsibility. Communication, we have an entire module, again, dedicated to communication skills. This module also dives into presentation techniques, what techniques you should use when presenting, whether that's at a conference or a medical congress, so that you, again, can become a successful and broadly trained professional. Project management, we go over the entire drug development process. And relationship building, we mentioned how BCMAS and medical affairs is highly regulated. Within the program, we have an entire module, again, dedicated to the compliance standards for interactions dealing with medical affairs. All right, so now that we've reviewed those key skills to excel in a career in pharma, let's now shift to the interview portion of today's discussion. So as Caitlin mentioned, we're happy to have one of our BCMAS graduates on this webinar with us. We have Matthew Scott. So Matthew is currently a medical scientific liaison at BD in the UK, and he actually has experience in developing the medical affairs function in the UK and also in Ireland. He's with us today again to tell us his perspective of the BCMAS program and also what skills he has witnessed are required to excel and propel in medical affairs. I'll stop here. Caitlin, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. That's right, Kiana. Thank you so much for joining us, Matthew. Now, we do have some questions that we regularly get from those interested in medical affairs and from those with all sorts of backgrounds, but really with a similar goal, and that is to work in the pharmaceutical industry in medical affairs. And Matthew, I understand that you have a more non-traditional kind of route into medical affairs. So can you tell us a little bit more about your background and your experience?
Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I've been in BD in medical affairs for pretty much 2 years now, and I came in through the clinical route. So by training and experience, I'm a paramedic. I'm a registered paramedic. I spent 15 years in the ambulance service, and I did further qualifications. I became a clinical team leader, clinical mentor. I did a postgrad teaching qualification. I became an education manager. So I used to teach and train paramedics. And I did project management, but before that, I worked in the pharma industry. I worked in sales and clinical research. So I come from a science background and a clinical background. And I came into BD. I was only paramedic at the time that came into BD. And I would say we come from different backgrounds. We have scientists, we have PhDs, we have a pharmacist in our med affairs team, we have a lot of nurses, and we have people who have done progressive roles within industry and some sort of science or clinical background. So I did come into med affairs from, as you say, a non-traditional role. From my experience, it tends to be scientists, pharmacists who tend to come into it, but that I would suggest is more pharma. And years ago, when I worked in pharma, that seemed to be the case, or medics, a lot of doctors. But because I work for a medical device company, my skills in vascular access, I've cannulated a number of patients and over the years and drawn up fluids and given various medications and what have you, airway management, all of those skills, aligned with this role. So I came in as a clinical consultant. Then I did a secondment as a clinical marketing manager. And then that gave me a good foundation for this role in medical affairs, which we've set up from scratch in the UK about 2 years ago. So I brought in all my experience. I brought my clinical, my science background, my clinical teaching, a number of the factors that Kiana's actually mentioned, the project management and those, that communication and cross collaboration. And I think that's where med affairs is great, because if it's aligned with that, if you're a pharmacist and a molecular level and PhD, maybe that kind of area would be great for you to get into a biopharma company. But for me, it was perfectly aligned for that function. But the skills, the skills are the same. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like you definitely had a hand in pharma, even with sales, research, and like you mentioned too, the communication and project management. I think that that's all pretty relatable, with the industry and how people do get involved. So, at the ACMA, we do speak to a lot of individuals that span the entire industry, from earlier stages of clinical research through medical affairs and through commercial and sales. So Even though these functions are very different from each other, the skills to succeed in pharma can be used basically across the board. So what skills would you say, Matthew, are most important to excel and succeed when working in medical affairs?
Yeah, based on my experience, I made some notes actually. It really mirrors what I was saying earlier about my top one is communication. And I think, from, whatever background you come from, you need to be able to communicate well with people from different backgrounds. And that's not just internal stakeholders, colleagues, sales, clinical marketing, market access. It's the key opinion leaders, it's the nurses, it's the doctors. I really, a pharmacist even, I really believe it's communication skills. And also to add to that, I also touched on earlier, not just the verbal communication, but the email communication, how you construct emails. I think one of my big kind of challenges sometimes is interpreting complex data and making it understandable to people. And you have to tailor it to that audience. And that, I think that's, for me, it's come with experience, but that's communication. And also to engage with, electronic communication. I say email is one, but there's many different databases. And I think really, whether you're doing Teams meetings or in person, it all comes down to communication and presentation. And for me, it came with experience with time. But that's my first one. And I think as well, disseminating, we do train the trainer and dissemination of, a recent journal article, and we have to train the team and cascades to the sales team, and then they can use that information. And again, you have to tailor it depending on who you're presenting it to and what their need is. The other one I've got is scientific inquiring mind. So as I say, my team, paramedic, nurses, we've got years of experience, pharmacists, PhD, science backgrounds, Master of Science, that, we all complement each other, but you have to have that scientific inquiring mind, that sort of, that self-motivation for finding out how things work, why things work. And I think that's just there, isn't it? And I will say from experience, you don't have to be a subject matter expert, but you need to be able to work, and you mentioned this earlier, about cross-functional collaboration. You need to find out the people within the business who can help you with that, who are the experts in that field. But I think that mindset is key. And obviously, in line with that, you need to be able to understand complex data. And sometimes you will need to discuss it with colleagues. You can't be an expert in everything. And you're not expected to be honest. I think you need to be able to facilitate things. Time management. So, and again, this is really building what you said earlier, really. Sometimes you're involved with multiple projects, and they are, Med Affairs, key projects are aligned with the key growth drivers of the company. But you're often pulled by different departments to and customers to help with off-label requests, reactive scientific exchange requests, complex information on products that isn't in the instructions for your or technical data. You have to engage with research and development teams and that kind of, or it could be anything. And you can't be everywhere at one time. But time management is my other one. And what I've learned over the years is eventually is being able to say no. And then commercial savvy, you mentioned that. This is really, I think from experience, is key. You need to understand where Med Affairs fits in with the department. I work really closely with marketing. We're not part of the marketing department, obviously, but we do work closely with marketing to understand their needs. And then other functions, even sort of from a financial perspective and sales. And I work a lot with the clinical team. And I think just that ability to think strategically, for me, that came with time. And as I said before, I retrained to become a paramedic because the clinical research, it really got me into, I'd love to work clinically with people. I used to go to intensive care units, and I thought I really wanted to be a clinician. And so I think that's going to come back to the commercial arena, but I'm using all of those elements. For me, because I've set up a function from nothing, and I've trained up and mentored and coached a colleague to assist, that ability to advise and lead. But also that's when you're at meetings and you go to sometimes quite a complex marketing meeting. You think, okay, I understand where you're going with this, but what is it you want from Med Affairs? Is it evidence generation? Is it, is it publication of, what is it? What's the actual need that you want from Med Affairs? So you have to understand what your remit is, what your work output is for that initiative. Those were my key ones. And I think in line with that, everything else sort of is bolted onto that, that sort of complex data and dissemination. It's all those are the key elements for me, I think.
Good. I'm actually excited that you mentioned how you were a paramedic, and you don't have the traditional medical affairs background, PharmD, MD, PhD, but you still bring value to your team. That's what we try to highlight across the board, especially within ACMA. We get a lot of inquiries on those who do not have a traditional clinical background, whether they're a paramedic, they're a nurse, and they're just asking, how can I break in? Am I a good fit? And it's always yes, because while you may not have the traditional medical affairs background, you still have that clinical knowledge. And if you deal directly with patients, you're able to quickly switch, again, like you mentioned, something super scientific and translate it into layman's terms for a patient to understand, for example. And that's what medical affairs is all about.
Yeah, good point. And I think, it depends on the industry. When you think about it, med affairs is in pharma, it's in medtech, medical devices, it's in consumer healthcare, it's in a number of different factions. And I think, if you come in and, as I said earlier, if it's a molecular, company and you've got a molecular PhD in that experience, yeah, great. I mean, that wouldn't be aligned to me at all. But for me, it was very much, that's my therapy area. But those key skills that you said, those are key. That communication and that ability to turn something what might appear quite complex into layman's terms, or well, not necessarily layman's terms. It could be a anaesthetist you're talking, but you have to tailor it to that audience. And then I did postgrad qualifications. I don't have a PhD, but I've got two postgrad. I've got a postgrad in clinical research and in teaching. But all my colleagues, they have the same, whatever their credentials are, they have the same inquiring mind.
That's the same across the board, no matter what your background is, as long as you're willing to adapt and tailor, your previous knowledge and learn more, you can succeed, especially if you have those skills that you mentioned. Perfect. And then, of course, within the BCMAS program, we really try to highlight those skills. We try to highlight that message in the BCMAS program. So I know that you've gone through the program. You're now one of our graduates. So a quick question that I have that, others I'm sure are interested to hear is, before you enrolled into the program, how did you first become familiar with BCMAS? Did you just see it randomly or stumbled across us?
Yeah, good question. I wanted to, because we're setting up med affairs from scratch, I wanted to, well, we did have training internally, but I really wanted to add to that. And I spoke with my manager, who supported me doing a course. In fact, BD had been really supportive, my manager had been really supportive. And I think that's been key, really. I had to do it my own time, but he said to me, well, have a look and see what's out there and what's aligned for us with med affairs. And I looked at, I do this with anything, whenever I buy or look into something, if I look at reviews, and I look at lots of reviews, and sometimes it takes me a while, and then I get a feel for, what's most suitable for me. And most suitable for me, the reason I like the BCMAS course and ACMA was that, both, the ACMA and the BCMAS course both had, incredibly high reviews, and it's an established program. But for me, I enjoyed the pharma, and of course, I come from a pharma background as well. So I enjoyed the whole course, but I wanted something that also had med tech as well. And I don't know where my career will go in a few years' time, and maybe I'll return to pharma, who knows? But it gave me a holistic view. And I reckon that because it was tailored to, depending on the country and your background, you can actually, I don't know if this was mentioned, but you can actually put in that you're from Europe or UK, and the course will then have a sort of tailored element where you've got the up-to-date European guidelines or directives and so forth. So it was up to date, and the examples were very much aligned with Europe and UK as well, UK and Ireland. So it just was the right fit, and it gave me a good overview. And for me, it was a blueprint or a framework to sort of build on.
Yeah, and you just hit the nail on the head. We have that for its region specific content for, certain modules that we have. So that's great. It's great that you, found that out. And, it's pretty common for us to hear when professionals research and find ACMA or BCMAS online, it's through those reviews, through word of mouth, basically. So, but I have a question for you as well, is how would you say the BCMAS program helped to prepare and build your personal skill set in medical affairs?
Yeah, I actually made quite a few notes on this because from the outset, it helped me. So, I started learning a great deal. Again, as you said earlier, I did it in my own time. I did it at weekends, at evenings. and with my own commitments in life, some weeks I did more than others, but I love the fact that you could do it, at your pace. So I did find that from the outset, it was reaffirming the knowledge and the experience that I'd already got. It taught me new stuff. And I would say that everything made more sense in Med Affairs, and I could see where I needed to go. I could see that we had a lot of stepping stones to get to that level of excellence, which I would aspire to, as a professional and in the role and as a department. And my confidence, I would say, improved tremendously. And I have to say, personally, I enjoyed the course, and then I felt that my job was more enjoyable. I've always liked the role, but it was more enjoyable because I really got it. And then when I went to the meetings, and sometimes I was asked very complex questions by some of the team, the marketing or so, and I actually knew I knew what we were supposed to do. It could be a proactive or reactive response to a key opinion leader or whatever it was. I actually knew, and I could answer with confidence. So it really did help me progress and understand. And once I started understanding, it just built on that, really. And I think to say, I'd look at my notes because there were quite a lot of benefits, but I've highlighted this. For me, I felt I was able to add a greater value and leadership and guidance in the role, and really evidence. It's a new function. Well, it's not now, but it was a new function, having to reaffirm to people that it's actually a good thing, Med Affairs, and we can help you. But definitely the confidence and the leadership, and my work relationships did benefit as well. And the qualification actually formalised what I'd learned. I was applying what I learned from day one. Well, certainly the first month, and then having the qualification, I do put the BCMAS after my name because I do believe it does add credibility and assurance to colleagues and customers that that it's a gold standard. And it was a lot of work, and it's recognised, and people get that, they see that, and I think that's important.
These are awesome tips and tricks that you're explaining. I mean, whether they're considered tips and tricks to others here on the webinar they're listening to, they're tips and tricks that if I was listening on the webinar that I could take with me as I go through the course. You mentioned there's others from other organizations or other teams like commercial who would ask you direct questions, where if you didn't have the BCMAS program, you would have been lost. Or, hey, give me a second.
I'll get back to you. Get back to you. Yeah.
Let's research really quick. And I'll find it. But the BCMAS program actually prepared you to where you feel more confident, which we know the more confident you feel, the more confident you appear, to others outside looking in. And now they trust you more for that value messaging. They trust you more as that expert within your team.
Yeah, any new function, you're still learning, and people got that, but it just added to it. And also with my colleagues, I could discuss things with my colleagues. But that said, it's the whole learning thing, isn't it? I mean, I'd ask colleagues for advice on certain things, they'd come to me for advice on certain things. And I felt it was not just for me, but I was able to help a lot of people with the new knowledge. And it was the best thing I did, really. But I mean, we did training, but it just for me, it just brought it all together.
Awesome. So you mentioned also that you would work on this on the weekends when you had free time. Do you have any other tips or tricks for anyone on the call here of how you managed to complete the program? If anyone's having trouble, or was it hard for you to pass the final exam?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because some weeks I was able to do a heck of a lot, and other weeks I couldn't due to various reasons. And for me, I had like I've always done with my studying in the past, I've had a wall planner with like sort of my sort of schedule and expected where I want to be. And a couple of weeks I know I just too much stuff going on, so I had to make up time. But actually, I think as long as you're self-motivated and you want to do it, and if you're on the course, you want to complete it, you'll find a way. But I wouldn't give yourself a hard time if you don't complete certain bits in certain time, because what I did find is some modules I did quite quickly, others it took me longer, because we're all different. We all have a different way of learning, and certain things will pick up more than others. Some people have more of a maths or a biology, but and whatever sometimes you have to just spend a little bit extra on the modules, and others I did quite quickly. So I thought, don't give yourself a hard time. You will do it. I had time spare at the end of it, and what I liked about it, and what worked for me, was the fact that each module, there's at the end there's knowledge checkers at the end, and I also like some of the fun quizzes, which are sort of just little knowledge checkers, and it kept me motivated. And the course was a mix of video and games, and then some narrative and some things that you had to stop and really think about, and others that you could answer quite quickly. And it just made it more engaging. And then the question bank at the end, for me, was brilliant, because again, I was like, right, I know that, I don't know that. So I go back to that element, and it really focused me and it helped me. And I think by that time, I looked at the timing and I thought, well, actually, I'm ahead of time now, so I didn't need to worry at all. But the exam at the end, I think if you don't put the work in, then it's quite hard, because you have to, it demonstrates your understanding. By the time I did the exam, I was ready, and I knew that I'd do okay in it. Well, I did, passed it first time. So I knew, from the preparation that, that I was good to go. But I probably did the question bank 3 times, 4 times, and then went back to certain topics. And also, I actually knew that I'd learned a lot. It wasn't just passing an exam. I actually understood it. So that was for me, it was a big personal achievement.
That's awesome. Yeah, listeners today on this webinar surely got a treat with that insider experience for you going through the program and completing it. So thanks again, Matthew, for sharing with us your experience today. I'm sure many people can relate to your experiences also professionally, and just want to level up their skills in some way.
Pleasure. Thank
you. All right. Well, it looks like we do have a bunch of questions coming in, both regarding Kiana's presentation and also Matthew's story. So let me get these questions up. There's a ton of them being sent to me right now. And just a word before we get in. So we will try to get to as many questions as possible. We are also answering them via the chat portion of this, or the Q&A portion of this. And any of those that are unanswered, we will address once we post the recording of this session on our YouTube. So keep those questions coming, and we'll either answer them on this webinar or afterwards. All right. So our first question is, do people in medical affairs ever interact with payers?
Matthew, I don't know if you want to answer this question, but I can jump in briefly here. So organizations are different. It varies from organization to organization what stakeholders or which stakeholders medical affairs interact with. Specific medical affairs teams, they generally do not interact with payers. On the payer side, that's usually on the reimbursement section or sector of the industry. So managed care, market access, and patient access. And you're probably familiar with the MSL, the medical science liaison, as the field personnel for medical affairs. There's like an image or a mirrored position on that reimbursement side that does interact with payers. And they usually have the title of field reimbursement managers, or FRMs. And so those teams usually are the professionals in industry who interacts with those payers.
Great. Question number 2, would someone currently in industry or medical affairs, market access, be a good candidate for this certification?
Yes. So it's for anyone across the board. Usually within our board certification enrollees, we usually see those who are either trying to break into the industry, just trying to gain more experience, but a large sector is also those who are already in the industry, but they want to know more and increase their knowledge about other cross-functional areas, whether that's commercial or research. And also they want to, get a promotion. But really with the BCMAS, it's just really setting that standard of excellence and showing from the outside looking in that you're an expert in this area.
I have another question. This is for Matthew. It says, hi, Matthew. What are key requirements for succeeding in a medical affairs role?
I think it's very similar to what I said, actually. I think, that those communication skills, that commercial savvy, the ability to communicate with people from different backgrounds. I would say for me, So it's slightly different, as you say, but I was in a medical device industry, which was aligned with my background. If you have a specific science background, you might be a cardiac background, it might be a renal background. There are a lot of, different sizes. It doesn't have to be the large pharma companies, but there's a lot of companies out there that may be aligned with your therapy area or your, the solution that's offered, the products that are offered. So I think there's a lot of scope out there. My personal view and my personal experience is to find the companies that are aligned with your background. But that said, it's transferable skills again, isn't it? There might be something in consumer healthcare. You might be surprised, but I think those core elements that I discussed earlier and Kiana mentioned earlier, I think that your summary slide is brilliant. Those are the key elements. And then if you come from a PhD or a master's or whatever level, clinical background like me, then see if you can find companies that are aligned with that area, because that might be more straightforward to get into. And then I have noticed that as you progress in medical affairs, then other doors open in other allied areas within that medical affairs remit. There's medical writing, there's medical information, there's all sorts. You could be a field-based MSL or a regional manager or whatever within medical affairs. But I think align maybe your first job search with that particular area that sort of similar to your background. Is my experience anyway.
Good advice. Good advice. The next question is, would the BCMAS certification be a route to enter industry for an academic PhD?
Yes, I would recommend it. I mean, the eligibility for the BCMAS program is PharmD, PhD, MD, or at least a few years of experience in the industry. And so with the PhD, you are eligible for the BCMAS program.
Great. Another question, and maybe this is for both of you to answer, but it says, do you feel like this certification provided leverage on any competition in the marketplace?
Matthew, I'll give you that one.
I think it sets you, it gives the gold standard, as I said before, it gives accreditation, it gives assurance to people that you've reached a certain standard, and I think that's really important in any professional role. So I think the short answer is yes. I don't know if you want to add to that, but yeah, I'd say so. I think if you want to progress within med affairs, something like this is invaluable, and it's a gold standard, isn't it?
Okay. I completely agree with Matthew here. My answer is yes. I could really spend here maybe the next hour answering this question from multiple perspectives. But again, short answer is yes. Whether you have no experience or if you do have experience in the industry, this is looked at as a supplement if you're trying to enter into the role. So within any role of medical affairs, on average, there are 200 applicants. So imagine if you're the person going through those applications and you have 200, what would make it easier on you, to skim and shorten that list down? I would first throw out those who have no experience or no knowledge on medical affairs at all. How can you demonstrate that knowledge? Is, going through a board certification.
Yeah, and it shows that you're self-motivated and applying yourself, I think, as well, because it is a lot of work. I found it hugely beneficial, but I think it's recognised. If I may, I just thought of something that your previous question. One of my colleagues did a secondment in medical affairs. So I'd actually look to see if you are looking to break into med affairs, whether you could get a secondment in med affairs. I just thought I'd add that because I did a secondment in clinical marketing, which brought in elements of med affairs, and that helped me actually, I believe, to get this role.
Yeah, and we did actually survey KOLs, and 87% of them said that they do prefer BCMAS professionals. So obviously there's a competitive advantage there, even for companies. Companies who do it, medical directors, people who want to enroll a whole team. So just a note on that, since I do with a lot of our team deployments here. I do have another question here. This one is a long one. It says, I am an international pharmacy graduate and have clinical research certificates. I am currently working in CRO company in oncology in clinical research studies. Please guide me through, as I'm interested if I have a chance in the field with the R&D and clinical research backgrounds.
Yes, this is what, we kind of mentioned this earlier on in the webinar, but clinical background, especially working in medical affairs, because you work, again, cross-functionally and collaborate with so many other teams, you already having that experience of research and development, you can bring insight to the medical affairs team that others who haven't worked in research and development don't have. You can bring in those insights like clinical trial design. I'm sure you said, I think you mentioned that you deal a lot with clinical research studies. So I'm sure you're a pro at evidence-based medicine and analyzing clinical trials. And within medical affairs, that's key. Reading statistics, knowing how to interpret clinical trials is very key for medical affairs.
Yeah, that's some good advice there. Let's see, a few more questions. As in medical affairs, as a medical affairs specialist, is it difficult? It is difficult rather to find a job. That is what you face unless you have an internal network. So I guess speaking more about our network of graduates a little bit, Kiana, once you graduate the program and how it helps.
Exactly. So just like Caitlin mentioned, within the BCMAS program, ACMA, we try to help you as much as we can. We have multiple resources to help you. And one of those is our own network of BCMAS graduates. LinkedIn is one of those #1 ways of how to find positions, especially within the industry. If I could put a number on it, probably more than 90% of industry professionals are on LinkedIn. So first, if you don't have a LinkedIn, please make one. But if you do, within BCMAS, we have a network with just our graduates. And so within that network, there are those who are trying to find jobs, but also those who are leaders in medical affairs teams. Caitlin mentioned that a lot of pharmaceutical organizations, they reach out to us and we certify their entire medical affairs teams. So our network are leaders in the industry. Our network are managers and medical directors who hire for these teams.
All right. This one is a really good question. It is, what professional evolution would you advise a PhD who intends to develop skills in research and development and medical affairs with the aim of later creating his own startup? Should it start with R&D and then move on to medical affairs, or rather the reverse? Looking for a little advice here.
From my perspective, I would go in the order of drug development, right? So following the drug development process, and my opinion would say to start with research and development and then move to medical affairs and then move to commercial and sales, and your startup will kind of mimic the same.
Great. I have another question here geared to both of you. What do you think about doing the BCMAS course without any experience, I guess, real world experience? Would it help an MD who wants to become an MSL?
Again, I'm going to say yes, and I'm also a little biased, but without any experience, you need knowledge. Right now, we have YouTube, we have blog posts, but what place can you have one central location to where you can learn the most about medical affairs? Medical affairs is a very niche area. When it comes to rules and regulations, you have to know those in and out. So unless you know what to look for, I think it will be a hard task to go out and try and understand as much information as you can through just Google. And so to me, the BCMAS program provides that not only fundamental knowledge you need, but also it goes on top of those fundamentals. It goes on top of those and build upon them, so you are an expert.
I enjoyed the extra links. So you do the core elements, and then if you want to, you can go to extra links like, some of the different organizations in Medicines Council. You can really go to town and learn more and more if you wish. And there were plenty of those links, weren't there, on the some of the modules for further learning. So just keep learning.
Yeah, and I mean, I can tell you from my standpoint, I've been with the ACMA for a few years now, that BCMAS is now officially seen as the standard. It's actually mentioned on Wikipedia under the medical science liaison term. I think, we're really in the new era where credentials like BCMAS are a need to have, not really a nice to have, So I think that that would definitely help anyone who wants to, break in or get into being an MSL. We do have another question. It says, hi, Kiana, what are the basic differences in the job role for MSL and medical affairs jobs?
So that's kind of a contradiction. How I like to explain medical affairs is actually an umbrella term. So while there are jobs out there with the title of medical affairs specialist or medical affairs professional, I like to imagine medical affairs as this umbrella term, and there are multiple functions within this team. So within medical affairs, we have medical information, we have medical communications, we also have MSL, medical science liaison. Sometimes pharmacovigilance also sits in the medical affairs team. But what makes MSL itself stand out from the other roles is that MSL is that field medical affairs position. So the MSLs are the ones that are out in the field. They go and they're in provider spaces. They're speaking to our healthcare providers.
All right. I still have a bunch more questions coming in. We'll try to do one last one. Would you say a PharmD with a background in ICH, GCP, FDA, and IRB regulatory compliance and CRA experience at a global CRO would be on the right track towards becoming an MSL, or is this too unorthodox?
I will answer again and say yes. I feel as if nothing is too unorthodox at all, actually. I heard CRA experience. So as a clinical research associate, or you work directly with those physician offices. You've seen what's included in clinical trials, which type of data is really specific and what's important for clinical trials. And so that will directly carry over to medical affairs. Again, clinical trial design and analyzing those clinical trials and clinical research is key when it comes to medical affairs. So yes, I would say you're on the right track.
Yeah, and interestingly, but one of the roles I did was as a CRA many years ago in pharma. Yeah, I think it's that mindset. It's totally that.
All right. I think that will about do it for today's webinar. So thank you, Matthew, again, for joining us today. And thank you to our audience for all of those questions. Again, any unanswered questions we will address on the posted link of this session. And just be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, on our YouTube, and check out our website for more information about the ACMA and how to get board certified. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.